Welcome to the LDS Mental Health Podcast. This is a podcast for faithful women who want healing in their relationships, guidance from God, and internal peace. Each week, you'll hear mental health concepts taught through a spiritual lens from me, a licensed clinical mental health counselor, to help you start thinking in a higher and holier way. All right. I am so excited to welcome Stephen Shields to the podcast this week. Welcome, Stephen.
Hey, how are you?
Awesome. Thanks so much for coming on. I am really excited. We had Braden on a couple months ago, so this is going to air a couple months after his episode, and he works for your practice and just talked so many wonderful things about what you guys are doing for men and addiction and shame and all of that. And so I'm so excited to have you come on and talk about supporting people who have a pornography addiction. So thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, no, happy to. So yeah, Braden's a good egg. So.
He is. Yes, he's amazing. So tell us a little bit about your practice, what you guys do. You guys have a podcast. Tell the people about yourself.
Yeah, so there's there's kind of three parts. So practicing therapist. So we're based out of Sandy, Utah, and do some different programs around the country and different things, but accepted. And so in our logo is a kintsugi bowl. And if you're not familiar with that art, it's a Japanese art of breaking pottery and then putting it back together with gold, like mending the cracks with gold. And that's kind of symbolic of our mission. In that people are accepted. Like, you haven't done it wrong. This wasn't the wrong path for you. God didn't screw up. He wasn't like, oh, shoot, because your decisions, alternate plan of salvation. Like, let's go, like, no. Like, like when we all meet him, what we're going to want to see is the scars, right? And so what's interesting about those kintsugi bowls is when they're put back together, they're actually stronger than they were before. And so our tagline is experience healed. We do a lot of experiential therapy. Full body, being able to, as opposed to just talk therapy. But we also believe that people arrive in healed. And so I think people in addiction actually recover. I do not believe in the sentiment of once an addict, always an addict. I would tell you clinically, there's no evidence of that being true. And I don't know how you reconcile that with the belief in Jesus. Last time I checked, Jesus heals. So we definitely are on mission to fire clients as fast as possible. It's a lot more fun when you see people change their lives and move on and tell their friends that you're here or whatever. But and so experience healed, and it's we have 9 partners. And so we're working to kind of change the game that way and make dynamic programs. And so that's us. On the other side, my personal story, how I came into becoming a therapist, was my own story of sexual addiction recovery. So how to my addiction, I'm stealing money from the family business, hiring prostitutes while I'm in the bishopric in my ward and an ordinance worker in the Salt Lake Temple. So all of that dual life happening at once. Fast forward a decade later, here we are. And so amidst that journey, I realized people weren't sharing from the I. So men in particular who were struggling, like I'm the dude looking at all the porn, like I'm the dude having the affair, doing the thing, the cheating, whatever. And so I started that in 2016. It's now a nonprofit. So podcast is Unashamed, Unafraid. And our goal is legitimately just to share hope. And when people are like, man, it's such an isolating thing, not only for the person who is struggling with addiction, but also parents, their spouse, like it's an isolating thing. And so we share a bunch of stories of recovery and have experts come on and spread hope that way. And so that's a nonprofit. We raise money for some scholarships to things like the third thing we do is called the Warrior Heart. And it is a non-denominational spiritual men's retreat. Our LDS folks love it the best. And so that really just helps men's hearts connect back with God. It's one of the greatest things we've seen people do in their recovery, myself included. So on the executive team and board for that. So we do those Arizona, Utah, Idaho, Virginia, Alaska, some different places. But
that's awesome.
Yeah. So trauma healing, brotherhood, spirituality. We're trying to cover all the bases somewhere. So
I love that. I love that.
So very that's cool. All the things that you do. Yes. I love the concept of that and bringing in the spirituality, the whole body. Like my main modality I use is mind body bridging. So it's all about the mind, the body, and I love the spirituality aspect of that, like bringing the spirit in and
that's where I wanted to do kind of my coaching with that, is just being
Preach.
able to see a very specific niche. I live in the middle of nowhere, so I never get to niche down where I am. It's 5 hours for a referral. Nobody's taken a referral
Yeah.
from us. So you
Yeah.
just do everything here. But I love bringing the spirituality into things. So I think the Savior's our healer, whether people know it or not. And he's there and
Amen.
he's doing it behind the scenes, whether you acknowledge it was him or not.
Amen. Yep.
Yeah.
See it all the time.
Yes. Oh, thank you for sharing your story, though. Thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that story because I think when you have that lived experience and being able to talk from a place of that, it just brings a different dynamic to the conversation. And I love that you took that, you went and got your master's degree after that.
Yep. Yep.
That's
Yep. So
amazing.
master's was a lot of years later. I was doing a lot of like mentoring, coaching, speaking stuff before. So I kind of fell
Wow.
backwards into it. So I always tell
Yeah.
people I found out there was a hospital for myself and I'm like, wait. So I'm like, running, I'll be like, yo, y'all, there's a hospital out there, to then being like volunteering in the waiting room. And that's like starting the podcast or whatever and being like, I want to be in the room doing the heart surgery.
Yeah.
And I think more my speaking from the eye has made me a little bit of like Hamilton's my jam, like right,
Yeah.
like you're running out of time. Because I just
Mm-hmm.
think having experienced some recovered and healed in my
Yeah.
life, I'm like, I'm almost like somewhere between like pissed and anxious that like people don't know. And so I'm
Yeah.
like, we all got to hurry this thing up. Like, you can just do the things and be healed. This doesn't have to take 20
Yes.
years. Turns
Yeah.
out Jesus didn't need 20 years. He can do it
Yeah.
like right now. Let's get on with
Yeah.
it. So,
Yes.
doing things like coming on podcasts and such.
Yeah, I love it. I love that you're sharing your knowledge and so willing to do that. So let's talk a little bit about what it's like to you've probably experienced all angles of this, living it. Your wife probably you probably hear from her what it's like to be in this experience,
For
but
sure.
right,
Yeah.
but also helping other people. So supporting somebody who has a pornography addiction, talk to us about what that's like to be in a position to support somebody through that.
Yeah, I think there's two situations where people end up in the supportive role. And so the kind of the cleaner, easier one to understand is the parent-child
Mm-hmm.
relationship, right? Like I as my child is struggling with. And it's a really tough place because you're managing two emotional experiences. One, pretending that you're not disappointed in your child when you
Mm-hmm.
totally are, right? Like
Yeah.
no one has children. I have a 7 and a 10-year-old. So
Hmm.
my 10-year-old hits elementary school, and what do I have in my heart? That everything goes well for her. It's awesome
Hmm.
and amazing. She does everything well and it all goes good, right?
Hmm.
So as things
Nobody's
start to
ever mean to
happen,
them.
right? No one's well, and even like so
Yeah.
she has some big dyslexia learning stuff, and I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, right. So it's all this stuff, and I see shame entering the story, and I'm like, no, I'm a
Yeah.
therapist. I know
Yeah.
better. We don't
Right.
do shame,
Hmm.
but it's entering
Yeah.
anyways, and I see the things happen. Or you have those moments where I'm like yelling at my kids, and I walk in, I'm like, oh yeah, that's how you end up paying for their therapy later. Dang, like I got to figure it out. And so
Yeah.
one, you're wrestling with I can't get them to do anything. And the
Yeah.
actual issue of how do I show up supportive and how do I bridge that gap? But then I'm
Hmm.
also have to wrestle with the fact that this is not the experience I wanted to have as a parent.
Yeah.
And so how do I take care of my own heart while also holding their heart, which is a
Yeah.
tough dynamic, right?
Yeah.
And then as a partner, right, it just shatters the whole world. And
Yeah.
so like one of the analogies I use is it's like the house is like on fire, right?
Hmm.
But I've been told through the gaslighting or my own denial or the mix of the two, like, hey, don't worry about it, don't worry about it, don't worry about it. So as this fire is spreading, there's always all the signs. Like I'm like,
Hmm.
like I cough a lot in here. And like when I leave my house, everyone asks, like, do you smoke? Right. Or people will say
Yeah.
things like, hey, I'm kind of worried about you. Does he always treat you like that?
Hmm.
Or like does he always talk to you like that? Or
Yeah.
that feels weird to me that his business trips go like that, or that he won't let you ever see his phone, or all
Yeah.
the tell, right? Like so you have the
Yeah.
soot on your clothes, and then all of a sudden people don't want to come over to your house, so it's isolating. And you don't really
Yeah.
get what's going on until there's either that discovery or disclosure that's like, P.S. the house is on fire. And then instantly it all makes sense, right? You're like,
Yeah.
oh, the soot, the coughing, people
The
ask me smoking,
pieces come
like
together.
like why
Yeah.
the trick-or-treaters wouldn't come to my house. Like this is all making sense, right?
Yeah.
And so that is a whole, I mean, you could do 20 podcasts on just that
Yeah.
experience alone. But
Yeah.
as people get into it, the number one factor that people don't realize that people need is safety.
Mm.
So this is one of the secret sauces of working with people who are struggling with addiction is they actually need safety. Like if they felt safe in their world, they wouldn't be doing what they're doing.
You're right.
So we naturally as children of God just don't bounce outside our value system.
Yeah.
Like you and
Yeah.
I aren't walking down the street, Nikki, and going to lunch, and we're like, but you know what we could do? We could rob that old lady. Heck yeah, let's just exercise some power and like do this and go knock over a
Yeah.
walker and be like, what's up?
Yeah.
Like we just don't do that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because the
Yeah.
same
Yeah.
thing was like, hey Nikki, why don't you pick up a heroin addiction right now? You in?
Right. Right. Yeah.
No, you're
True.
not.
No. No.
People say it's a great high,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because we just don't organically as children of God just leave
Yeah.
our value system.
Right.
So
Exactly.
when
Yeah.
people are operating outside their value system, this is prodigal son business. Like they all know, having worked with, I'm at the point now I've legitimately heard hundreds of stories of men's like full stories, not like a pass
Yeah.
by in a sentence, like stories.
Yeah.
I've never met a one that was like, dude, I'm totally getting away with this. No one knows, and my life's awesome. No,
Yeah.
they are suffering the way the prodigal son suffered. They are away from home. They are scared, lonely,
Yeah.
suicidal,
Yeah.
depressed. These are people, this is the experience of being in addiction.
Yeah.
And anyone who knows the perfect song, if you want to know it, is the song by Jelly Roll called Somebody Save Me.
Mhm.
You can go
Yes.
look that up. That
Yeah.
you can't find someone in addiction who you don't play that song and it doesn't just drop them into tears because they're
Yeah.
like, dude, he gets it, right? Like
Yeah.
it is a
Yep.
desperate kind of sad living
Yeah.
in that state, no matter what it looks like on the surface.
Yeah.
And so the belief, right, of like, hey, accountability, the first thing, the best way to help people is to create safety
Mhm.
because if they were safe, they'll be honest.
Mhm.
So I've done this with people with time and memoriam. They come to my office, we create some safety, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I'm totally having an affair. I don't know how to talk about it." Or a
Yeah.
teenage kid that's like, "Oh yeah, I'm looking at a mountain of porn, but I don't know how to say that out loud."
Yeah.
So ways that I can tangibly create that
Yeah.
safety,
Yeah.
right, is saying things like, right, what could I do to be an emotionally safe place for you?
Mhm.
Or how would I need to show up to a conversation for you to feel like you could share your heart with me? Or,
Yeah.
hey, what is it about me that makes it hard for you to be honest with me?
Mhm.
Because when you go to someone, right? So if Kayla were to have come to me and been like, dude, I think you're lying. Like, tell me the truth. What's the deal? I'm going to double. I'm like, unless you have the evidence, I'm going to gaslight you. Don't talk to me,
Yeah.
right? But if
Yeah.
Kayla would have come to me and said, hey, don't know what's going on with you, love and care about you. I just wonder, is there anything about me that makes me unsafe for you to share with me what's really going on with you?
Mm. Yeah. Well, because safety looks different to everybody too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because when you're saying, I got to create this safety, like you could line up 10 people and all 10 people could probably say a different thing, right? And also
Yep.
probably depends on that dynamic because
100%.
you safety with your spouse might be different than your safety with your parent, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how they need to show up just based on personalities, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how they're doing that. So
Right.
that
And so,
question is wonderful.
yeah, so I take the burden off of the person in addiction who already hates themselves and is in their shame. Instead of saying, have some courage and step over that giant chasm
Hmm.
of darkness so we
Yeah.
can engage in starting this recovery process and I can support you. It's
Mhm.
much kinder to be like, hey, over there, what would
Yeah.
me building a bridge to you look like?
Yeah. Yeah.
And almost never is someone in recovery going to tell you the whole truth up front. Just disclaimer, if you don't know now, you know. And so if you say, hey, like whenever I speak anywhere, I'd say everyone listening to this podcast, when you get off it, go talk to your partner and ask them about their entire sexual history. Just tell me the story. Like, how old were you when you first heard the word sex? What did you hear about? When was the first time you saw porn
Yeah.
or a woman in a bikini or a naked adult man?
Yeah.
Even as a man, that's an experience. Like, oh, that's what mature genitalia looks like. Like, so
Yeah.
what was that from your first kiss to the first time you had sex to our relationship? Like, just give me the whole sexual history and share yours. Say, hey,
Yeah.
I would like to share my whole sexual history with you. I was told bad, 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 bad. And then green light when you're married, totally do it. It was
Yeah.
confusing. That was hard for me. Or,
Yeah.
I had experiences. I don't know how to talk about sex because I had some experiences that really shut me down that might be sexual assault that I haven't named yet. Very common experience
Yeah.
for women.
Yeah.
And so all the different, I'd like to name my sexual history. Are you willing to name yours? And so
Mm.
there's some of the ways that you can create safety, but it's about inviting them into safety
Yeah.
instead of assuming because they have lost safety with themselves. Like they don't trust themselves. They're not feeling okay about self. So
Hmm.
their instant projection is clearly you're not going to be okay with them.
Right.
And you're welcome to have your feelings. I'd be pissed if someone cheated on me. I think you should be.
Yeah.
But that's different than being able to be in a conversation and have safety, right? And we
Hmm.
and we have bigger scales of this, right? I don't agree with everyone's political views, but
Yeah.
I do operate in safety. There are
Yeah.
people that do things that make me angry, but that
Hmm.
doesn't mean I completely disconnect from them.
Yeah.
And so how is it that so I'd say the first thing you can do to help people is ask them the direct question. What could I do to be easier to talk to be someone you can share with? What
Yeah.
can I do to build a bridge to you? So if you have the teenage kid that doesn't talk to you or the spouse that doesn't open up to you, just ask, what would this have to look like for me to open up to you?
I love that.
And then when they don't, that's not on me anymore
Yeah.
because I can build a bridge and they can choose not to walk across it.
Yeah.
And so I had a recent experience with a client that I said, hey, we're pretty clear on what the work is here. Yep, I'm super clear. Great. What do you need from me? Um, Probably nothing. I'm not going to do it.
Mm.
And I'm like, okay, you are likely probably going to stay in these symptoms that are going on in your life if you don't do the things. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
just not ready, but thanks. This was really insightful. See ya.
Mm.
That was the end of our contract. So,
Wow.
as a therapist, I can walk
You
away
can't
from
do
that
the work.
moment being
Yep.
like, hey, I was a good therapist.
Yep.
I brought them to what they contracted me to do. They just don't want to do it. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
We're done. And so I
Yeah.
can say the same thing as a parent and the same thing as a partner, right?
Yeah.
Hey, I have really shown up despite my husband's gaslighting and the continual porn issue, whatever. I've showed up and asked what would safety look like.
Yeah.
Um, so how do I ask that? Now, the
Yeah.
$1 million question is, well, how do I go about doing that? And here's the truth: create your own safety.
Mm. Yeah.
Get to safe for you emotionally, spiritually, physically.
Hmm.
If you are not doing safety, you ain't gonna help anyone else be safe. That's like me standing in the burned down house and being like, you really should go outside
Mm.
so that this house doesn't collapse on you. Right.
Yeah.
Or staying in there and going, hey, I don't know, what should we do? Like if I can't get to safety, I'm not going to be doing safety with anyone else.
What would you say that looks like if someone's saying, I don't even know what it's like to find safety for myself? Like, how would you tell them what that even is?
Yeah, and that's where I would say generally when people make that statement, I don't believe them.
Mm.
I think it's a lack of awareness. So
Mm.
I do an
Yeah.
exercise with clients. We call it an angel piece where we say, hey, pick someone who was an angel to you between ages 0 and 10.
Mm.
And then they grab a scarf, they kind of psychodramatically bring him into the room, and then we have that role, right? So that they can talk to someone who's just a real resource to them, right?
Yeah.
And can kind of lean in and name that experience. Well, I have had clients that they're like, there wasn't anyone. I was
Mm.
never safe as a kid.
Mm.
Right. And I'm like, I get that that's the felt experience. So you may have never felt safe in your marriage. That I wouldn't be like, that's not your felt experience. It can't
Yeah.
be that bad.
Yeah.
But what I would say is I'd go back to what's smaller. So I had one client in particular that I'm like, so tell me what that looked like. I had a single mom and I completely had to take care of myself. She was a drug addict. I said, okay, so tell me how you did this, this, and this. How did you eat? I did it all on my own. No one was safe. No, I said, great. I said, how did you get to school? And I rode the bus. I said, great. Tell me about the bus drive. Was there someone driving the bus or you drove the bus? You had to also drive the bus and pick up
You
the
also
other
know how to
kids.
drive bus.
Yeah. Um, Pause. Tears show up.
Yeah.
That bus driver always smiled at me.
Mm.
There it is. They have a felt sense of safety. So in couples, for example, like this whole marriage has been unsafe. I'm like, generally as a blanket statement, I've worked with marriages that I'm like, yeah, that's pretty true. But then
Yeah.
I look at moments of like, hey, did you feel safe driving in the car? Yes. Yeah, yeah, we go boating. My husband knows his way around boats.
Mm.
When we're out boating, I know we're okay. When he's
Yeah.
out driving the boat and we're out on the lake doing the boat thing, he's got it.
Right.
Great. So although that is not enough safety to sustain a marriage,
Right. Right. We have a
start with
pattern.
where,
Yeah.
yeah, so I'd say start. It's an excellent question. Like, I don't even know what it's like to be safe. And that's where
Mm.
you have to slow down and do the mind body connections, the
Hmm.
spiritual practice. So that's where I'd
Yeah.
say go to that religious practice, whether you're going to the temple, going to your church meeting, going to walk, whatever. And
Yeah.
that's a great question to take to God. God,
Mm.
show me what safety looks like.
Mm.
Anytime you're feeling the spirit of the Lord, I would argue you're experiencing a level of spiritual safety.
Yeah.
And so it's really about growing and rediscovering as opposed to like learning for the first time.
Hmm. I was just thinking like other terms people might use for safety that they're probably not recognized, like peace, connection, right?
Yep.
Like,
Grounding,
yeah,
present,
yeah,
centered, in
yeah,
balance. A big one that
yeah.
shows up, a big one that's a good symptom for people who experience betrayal trauma, or a partner of someone is when they're clear. Because
Mm.
gaslighting makes things really unclear. I get unclear about my identity, your identity, right? My whole
Yeah,
foggy is a word I hear often.
yeah,
And so when I have clarity, that's a
yeah,
good sign like safety is present. Like, now I remember this one time I was on this girls' trip and I just felt so clear. And I'm like,
yeah.
right, you're saying safety is
Yes,
another way to say it.
exactly.
It's
Okay, that's
funny.
good. That's good.
Yep.
Yeah, good. Okay, so tip number one for people supporting people in who have a
Create
pornography addiction.
your own safety
Okay,
and invite the person you're supporting into their safety.
is
How can I
number
support
two.
you in creating that's I'm saying that's one. We're doing two
That's
for
one.
one here.
Okay, okay, perfect.
Safety first for
Good.
myself and others because you can't give something you don't have. You can't
Yeah.
take someone somewhere you have never been.
Yes. Good. I love that. So safety is number one.
Yep.
Okay. Awesome. What's number two?
Acknowledge your own emotional pain in the betrayal and the experience.
Mm. And to yourself, to other people.
Yes, and so if I can't say it out loud, there's a
Mm.
reason.
Yeah.
And so the number one indicator of people recovering in any addiction is community. So if you had 10 of your listeners call in and tell me the story about their husband, and you said, Dickie, Stephen, bet on which one is going to recover, I will ask one line of questioning and one line only. I want to know about their community.
Mm.
How many close friends do you have? Are you active in church? Are you close to those people?
Mm.
Do you have people who know your story? Do you have close business partners? Do you ever go on guys trips? Do you golf? Do you connect with people? Are you close to people, or are you isolated? That is the number one indicator of whether or not people will do any of the things that require recovered and
Interesting.
healed is community. And
Yeah.
so if I cannot acknowledge my experience, right? So, for example, I recently worked with a client who has a very large public profile.
Hmm.
There are legitimately thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people who would love to be her friend.
Hmm.
That's not community.
Yeah.
Because when I said to her, how many people know that your partner has cheated on you,
Hmm.
that it's happened over the course of your marriage, and that you're actually not okay? How
Hmm.
many people know that off stage version of you? Because we all have an on stage version of us that we show up in the world and do, and then our off stage personal, the behind the curtain, if people really
Yeah.
knew. So, off stage version of you, I said, how many people know this story?
Mm.
She says, I have one friend who kind of knows. So, I would give her a D minus in the community column.
Yeah.
That's not community, even though she could have people around her 24/7 who
Yeah.
love her and are engaged in her. That's not community. You being Relief Society president isn't
Yeah.
community.
Right. Right.
Doesn't
Yeah.
count. You were in a
It's not a two-way
service role.
street here.
No, that's the
Yeah.
stage version of you.
Yeah.
I want to know, who do you actually talk to about how being Relief Society president while you have kids and a job and is crazy hard. And when you're
Yeah.
depressed, you're like, if I have to do one more food order, oh my gosh. Right.
Yeah.
And I'm over, if I have to make one more casserole, do one more visit, right? Or I'm young women's leader and
Hmm.
I can't do these activities every week in 5 weeks of my summer. And I can't, how do I do all this? Who actually knows your story? So that's one thing I do early with clients is, can you acknowledge your story and can you share it with? So one thing
Yeah.
I tell people always is, share your story with 3 people who are different people. So not all
Mm.
at once, 3 different experiences where you go to lunch with that friend, you hang out one evening, you go for the walk, whatever it is, go over there and say, "Hey, Nikki, we're friends, but I don't know that you know me. And I don't know if you can hold space for, some of my story and some of my life." "Hey, sure, Stephen, great. This is what I'm going through."
Mm.
And as you share your pain and your story, it's going to allow you to acknowledge your experience. Because
Mm.
like all trauma experiences, as partners of people, we get stuck in one of two camps. If we get stuck, if we're not moving forward into healing and helping our partner heal, is we either go all the way to one side where it's fine, everything's fine, and we don't talk about it. So this is the origins of like my in-laws. Like, they just pretend nothing's happening. Like,
Yeah.
we're not going to talk about it. Had a conversation with my father-in-law once that he's like, "I love that you're doing Unashamed and Afraid. I just literally don't know how to talk about it. Like, I just can't
Hmm.
talk about things."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Right, get it." So bury the head in the sand, one end of the spectrum. Or you can do my family. You can't show up to a Shields dinner, watching a football game. You can't drive in the car for longer than 10 minutes with the Shields family without talking about childhood sexual abuse and
Mm.
all the stuff and how it's defining
Yeah.
our whole lives, right? Now, I'd
Yeah.
say both my family and my in-laws have grown, but the
Yeah.
same thing happens, right? And so if this defines every moment of your life, and you're like, the fact that I'm betrayed, I'll never be happy again, and everything's ruined.
Yeah.
I have met the women, and there are people that do it. There are podcasts you can find that will join you in that victimhood and talk
Yeah.
about their ruined life and live in depression, fear, and anxiety till the end. I don't
Yeah.
recommend living there. Back to the Jesus heals part. But then
Yeah.
also, just as damaging, I see women land in the other camp that they're like, "Oh, it's fine. It's fine. It's not a big deal. I'm fine." You're not fine. The house
Yeah.
is on fire. Not
Yeah.
fine. Not
Yeah.
fine. Big deal. Like,
Yeah.
big
Yeah.
deal. And so when I share my story with people,
Yeah.
it allows it to become real, but it also allows it to become right sized.
Mm.
So it's not too big and it's not too small.
Yeah.
Right? Because
Yeah.
if I'm minimizing the fact that my husband's in the middle of an affair, when you share that story with 3 people out loud, that minimizing is going to zip up real quick. Because you're going to be
Yeah.
like, "Oh, I'm actually in crisis." Yep, you
Yeah.
sure are. Let's
Yeah.
get to stepping, right? And doing
Right.
the thing. Where if I'm in drama, right? And it's the Shields family, I'm doing it all the time, everything, doing the thing. When you share that story with 3 people and you're like, "No, but he looked at softcore porn."
Mm-hmm.
When? Like sometime this last year?
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, "Okay, but like, he's a really great guy and you want to stay married, right? Like, there's a lot here to work with, right?" That
Mm-hmm.
will help right size it and that it's not,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because you deserve to have your story validated and seen and heard. And the
Right.
biggest mistake that people make is they want the person who hurt them to validate it. So, an
Yeah.
analogy that's really common in the therapy space for betrayal trauma is, you're walking down the sidewalk, boom, drunk driver hits you. Can you imagine if that person, when the ambulance shows up, was like, "No, no one help me. I need that drunk driver to walk over here, acknowledge that he hit me and that I'm
Yeah.
bleeding
Yeah.
in the street. And if he will not acknowledge that I'm bleeding in the street, I'm not moving out here. I'm going to bleed out on this spot. And I don't
Yeah.
care if I never walk again. And if I black out, don't move me from here until that SOB who hit me acknowledges it." I'm
Right.
all about anger. You should process anger. Anger is not something we should shut down. It's a healthy
Yeah.
emotion to have amidst the mix of all the emotions.
Yeah.
However, that is not the person to get your story validated initially. I hope at some
Yeah.
point in time in your healing process and in their healing process, they're willing to acknowledge your story and make repair. However, your
Yeah.
healing is not contingent on it, and your
Yeah.
ability to support them is not contingent on it. Because
Yeah.
guess what? That alcoholic is a really bad surgeon.
Yeah.
So he might be willing to pick you up and put you in the back of the truck and drive you to where he thinks the hospital is,
Right.
which he can't find because
Yeah.
he's intoxicated.
Yeah.
So what you really need is for him to get in the other ambulance or back of the police car, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he needs to go to detox while you go to the ER.
Right.
And
Right.
so that's one of the places you get stuck is like, well, they know that they did it. So my husband partner knows, I know, that's good enough. No, it is
Right.
not good enough. The biggest mistake, because once I acknowledge my injuries and my pain and my experience, that is the gateway to me having self-compassion for myself in the experience, which
Yeah.
allows me to then have empathy for my partner.
And
For
create
the
safety for
correct.
both of
It
us.
folds on itself. Yeah, it folds
Yes.
on itself because if you do not do that work for yourself
Yeah.
and get your story heard and your pain acknowledged and known, you won't do anything to heal. You will never forgive them. You will be bitter, resentful. And this is one of the contempt, right? Is
Yeah.
one of Gottman's research for horses of the
Yeah.
apocalypse. It's the
Yeah.
number one. It is,
Yep.
according to Gottman's, who do all the marriage, it is the number one indicator. I have sat with numerous couples where the dude is now 3 years sober, disclosed
Yeah.
everything, doing all of it. She has not moved off that curbside. She is still bleeding out, and it
Yeah.
has, and I have seen it end many coupleships because
Yeah.
they're like, I love you, but if you refuse to go to the hospital, I can't stay here forever where you hate me.
Yeah.
Sorry, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, in aiding and supporting someone in recovery, you have to let your story be known so you can heal. From that place, you will organically, as a child of God, be able to do the empathy, the kindness, and do all of the different things. So, the
I love that.
tangible is walking away from this podcast. Who are the three people you're going to share your story with? Your offstage, unedited, real version of your story. And here's the prayer that gets answered every time. Heavenly Father, I want to be seen and heard. I want my heart to be held. Will you lead me? Will you show me
Mm.
the people who are safe for me, who can hold this
Oh,
story? Will you inspire me to know who those other women are or people who could hold my story? That's not my
yeah.
partner. Because
Yeah.
apparently that's what I'm supposed to do for the both of us. Lead me to that person. And that's when God's going to inspire you. You're going to get a new
Mm.
calling at church and get put in a presence and you'll be like, man, I love her. This one, we've never
Yeah.
connected.
Yeah.
Or you're going to walk it, or you're going to start going to pickleball or a yoga
Yeah.
class and you'll be like, oh, I kind of connected with her. And you're like, and God will, he'll drop it like
Yeah.
like the anvil in the old Acme cartoons. He'll be
Yeah.
like, hey, Nikki, it's
Yeah.
her,
Yeah.
Sarah, that you play pickleball with. That's the
Yes.
one.
That's the
You asked,
girl.
I'm answering. Go to lunch, spill the beans.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
so that God will answer that prayer.
Yeah.
Three people who you can share your full
I
offstage
love
story
that.
with. That's
Oh,
I'd say is tip
beautiful.
number two.
Okay. I love that. I love that it's filling yourself so that you can be there to be that safe place for your partner.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I love that. Okay. I'm interrupting this episode to tell you about an awesome resource for your family scripture study, family home evening, or even family dinner time. It's the LDS Mental Health Skills Deck. This is 52 unique mental health skills to help you and your family have clarity in your thoughts, work more productively, communicate better, improve your relationships, and learn to process your emotions. You could easily pull out a card during Come Follow Me, family home evening, or have one displayed at the dinner table. This will quickly teach and fortify your family's mental health for any of the inevitable future challenges coming your way. To grab this mental health resource for your family, click the link in my show notes. All right, back to the episode. Tip number 3 for supporting somebody with a pornography addiction.
Do not make their success or the relationship contingent.
Mm.
So if you are not willing to get divorced, staying married is not a choice. So here's the truth about almost everyone who's listening right now, I would guess, is they're going to say, Stephen, I would like to know all the tips to help my partner that end in them recovering and our marriage being a happily ever after. And I'd say, well, what if the things you need to do might put your marriage at risk? They'll go, well, then obviously I should do them. And I know a lot of people that stay in super unhappy marriages. And I know a
Mm.
lot of people that stay that I would argue God is not with you. And
Yeah.
we have, particularly for anyone Latter-day Saints listening, I would really encourage you to go back to the temple and listen to when we make that sealing covenant, right? The covenant of marriage in the LDS temple. I would invite you to again listen very clearly to what you promised to do and what you did not promise to do. Because
Mm.
what you promised to do was follow Christ's gospel within this relationship at all costs to honor the Lord.
Hmm.
You did not promise to stay in this relationship no matter what.
Mm. Very
Nor
true.
did you promise to stay in a relationship with someone who is unwilling to honor their path with God and be
Yeah.
walking towards Him. And in
Yeah.
fact, the entire thing is made contingent on your faithfulness, AKA in street language, if you do the things or not.
Yeah.
So, this idea that because we got married, signed, sealed, and delivered, it's a thing now is grossly inaccurate of LDS doctrine.
Yeah.
Don't have to take my word for it. Just walk in there and do some sealings, and you might
Yeah.
have a different perspective now that you're actually listening with these ears. It is
Yeah.
very cultural to say, hey, you're married, stay married no matter what.
Right.
Not accurate.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
my job is to follow God first, and I hope you come and that this marriage
Mm.
works out. And so when I'm trying to support someone, I cannot make the relationship contingent.
Mm.
So whether I'm a partner or it's a child. So I can't say, "Hey, son, I am willing to help you with your pornography addiction um because you need to be a good son and I'm your parent and I have to. Because you need to go on a mission. Because I need you to be happy and well. You should not need your children to do anything. You are an
Yeah.
adult.
Right.
You should take care of yourself. Whether your kids all turn their lives into dumpster fires or are total angels and do everything you wanted them to do.
Right. Right.
Your being okay as a parent. If you want to be a godly parent, you have to have your kids, whatever they do, not
Hmm.
contingent. Last time I checked, that's how God parents. He has a lot of kids doing a lot of shenanigan things and he ain't
Right.
stopping them.
Right.
However, last time I checked, his sense of self, his eternal joy does not falter based on what his kids do or do
Mm.
not do.
So true.
And so from a parent role, I don't, and I know some tough stuff. We had a tender story. John, who came down our podcast, his son OD'd on fentanyl.
Mm.
That's a tough experience to go through as a parent.
Yeah.
I can't even say that I can even have proper empathy for it because
Yeah.
it's so distant from my own experience. But if John's happiness is contingent, his ability to help that son or help anyone is codependent and
Hmm.
off course from the get go.
Yeah.
Codependency is not kind, it's mean.
Yeah.
Caretaking isn't kind, it's unkind, it's mean. And so it's super passive aggressive, but it's
Hmm.
mean. And so when we talk about helping someone, I got to be willing to let them go. And there's a
Mm.
cool it's a fun movie if you ever seen it, Bruce Almighty. So it's Jim Carrey, Jennifer Aniston.
I
Jim
love that
Carrey's
movie.
kind of a
Yeah.
tool. He's kind of a tool,
Yeah.
right? And he's like, "Hey, I could do whatever." And so he meets God. He's like, "You think you got it? Here, you can have God's power." So it's
Yeah.
contingent. Like he can't make someone fall in love with him, and he can't commit murder, but he has all
Yeah.
the power. So they kind of do that.
Yeah.
So he's doing all the stuff and whatever. And there comes a point in the movie when he's finally kind of getting it, right? Like no matter
Hmm.
what I turn, if I don't change, she's not going to want me. And he listens in on one of her prayers. So Jennifer
What was
Aniston's
that?
character is named Grace,
Hmm.
and she says, and her prayer is, God, I love him. Help me not love him.
Hmm.
Help me let him go. Like
Hmm.
free me of the burden that I'm only happy if he's happy.
Yeah.
So he gets back with God, and God's like, "What are you doing, man?" And he's like, "I don't know." He's like, "Why don't you pray for grace?" And he's like, say a real prayer. And he's like, world peace and world hunger." He's like, "Cool, if you're Miss America, give me a real prayer." He's like,
Yeah.
My heart is for grace. I want to pray for grace." And then he has this profound shift in his experience when he says, I don't want her to be with me and I don't want her back. I want her truly to be happy.
Mm.
And that's the shift is do the work to make your marriage or parent-child relationship no longer contingent.
Hmm. Yeah.
Hey, I would get divorced at any point in time. And a client asked me a couple weeks ago, he's like, "You wouldn't divorce Kayla right now?" And I'm like, "Oh, I absolutely would." It's always an option. This is always on the table.
Yeah.
Because depending on what happens, I totally would. If
Yeah.
Kayla started saying, "Hey, I don't believe in Jesus, I'm out," that'd be a deal breaker for me. If she's
Yeah.
like, "Hey, I'm going to start beating our kids," yeah, I'm
Yeah.
out. If she's like,
Yeah.
"Oh, I'm never going to be intimate with you on a physical, emotional, or spiritual level ever again. I'm just going to be pissed forever."
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm out. Right.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
when you can no longer be attached to the outcome of your partner's addiction,
Mm.
your ability to show up in a supportive way is night and day changed.
Yeah.
And so the specific exercise I would, the step to take away from doing here, right, is say, what would I have to do to be okay if I got divorced?
Mm.
Or what would I have to do to be okay if my kid turns his life into a dumpster fire?
Mm. And do
What
those things.
and do those things, right?
Yes.
So what would I have to do to
Yeah.
reconcile that I could get divorced? Because if you think of it like an intersection, if divorce is not an option, if you want to take the cultural Christian line of divorce is not an
Yeah.
option, then you can only turn right. So if turning right is the only option, is there actually a choice? No.
Yeah.
So I would argue anyone in that mindset, you are not choosing to stay married, and thus you cannot choose to support your partner because you
Yeah.
can't choose not to support them. So what
Yep.
you're actually doing is you're making no choice, which
Yeah.
means you're giving up all your accountability, all of your empowerment. You're
Hmm.
just giving it up to the process that I would label codependency.
Yeah.
When I bring choice back, no, I could turn left and end the marriage or turn right and stay in the marriage. Once I take that power back, I now can show up and support
Yeah. It's the principle of being acted upon or acting, right?
100%.
That in the gospel we are not agents to be acted upon in our marriage. We're not, or even in our with our children, like we're
Mm-hmm.
not there to just let them be, right? We can teach them, we can help them, we can do all these things, but we are not responsible for their agency and their choice with that.
Yep.
They get to do that themselves. And we are there to act and teach, but we are not there to control and make them make certain choices.
Right. And so that allows me to show up and support. So when my
Yeah.
partner comes, he's like, "Oh, I looked at porn again and I'm so lost." I can be like, "That sucks for you. I'm not going to live in that world because I have a choice to be in a relationship with
Yeah.
you or not. So
Yeah.
I probably am not going to stay in a relationship with you if you're like
Yeah.
depressed and addiction and like puppy doggy and all that. Like, yeah, I'm
Yeah.
probably out. In fact, wait, I know I'm out. So I'm going to be out on
Yeah.
that. However, man, that sucks for you. So I hope you get it together because I love you and I love to see our family work and all of the blessings and all the
Hmm.
things to happen. However, I'm good. And there's been more change enacted in relationships of people in addiction when their partner finally makes that choice to
Mm.
enact choice, to go, wait, I have
Yeah.
a choice here. And
Yeah.
when you start operating from a place of having choice, it dramatically changes your ability to support tenfold. It's one of the kindest things you actually can do
Yeah.
for your partner.
And really, as you're talking, I'm thinking like you think in your mind too, like, what is it that is making me want to be in this relationship or not? Like, what are my deal breakers essentially, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what are those things that I need to think about? Not just necessarily like, oh, everything's okay, you can do whatever. It puts a lot of pressure on the relationship. But when you say,
Mm-hmm.
no, these are my boundaries, this is where I lie, and this is how I want to be respected in our relationship, it allows that person to show up in that way as well.
100%. I had a lady come in and sit on my couch once. She had just caught her husband in another affair. This is like the umpteenth
Mm,
affair, right, guys? And she's, oh my God, and she's pissed. She's lit up like a Christmas tree.
mhm,
So they're both in there, and then he's out of the room, and I'm sitting with just her, and she's like, "If he cheats again, I'm out of here." And I'm telling, if he even texts her one more time, if he does anything where I'm out, and she's totally lit up. I
mhm,
look right at her, and I'm like, "No, you're not." She's like, "Yes, I am. If he ever cheats," I said, "He could walk out and go sleep with her tonight. You're not leaving him."
mhm,
"Yes, I am, but I'm like, "No, you're not." She pauses and then she just starts to cry because she had lost her empowerment through
yeah,
all of the gaslighting and she did not have choice.
yeah,
So he's literally treating her like garbage
mhm,
and there's no ability for her to leave the relationship at that time.
Yeah.
or change. Do you know
Yeah.
how much support she's providing her partner in that moment?
Yeah.
Zero, none, -5, right?
Yeah.
But when we're able to reclaim that power and go, hey, I have a choice here, so I can choose God or you. I don't have to just choose you and hope that we end up
Yeah.
getting to God together.
Yeah.
That level of accountability and empowerment actually is super godly and super kind. God did it all the
Yeah.
time. Christ has over and over from, right, when he says to the brothers on the ship, are you really Jesus? Yeah, well, here's some fish. Come follow me. It's an
Yeah.
invitation. He only asked it one time.
Yeah. He
He
wasn't
sat with
begging them.
he nope. He sat with Nicodemus on the rooftop. Wow, you get it? So let me speak to you, spirit to spirit in our knowing. 100%. I'm the Messiah and everything that comes with it. Come or don't.
Yeah. Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Matthew at his publican booth, they said, come follow me. Come or don't. Right?
Yep.
And so when I actually bring that choice in and get the power back, that is the one of the kindest things you can do to support your partner. And it's the same thing with kids. Well, what? You're not gonna knuckle down? You can go on a mission or not. I
Mhm.
honestly am
Yeah.
not married to it. I know
Yeah.
the value of going on a mission and how powerful
Yep.
that is, or going to college or doing whatever. But
Mm-hmm.
honestly, you're free to do whatever you want. Consequences,
Yep.
actions, it's like gravity. I'll support you either way. See ya.
Yeah.
Leave
Yeah.
that with a kid. Now
Yeah.
you'll see a kid do some choice making. Oh, wait a
Yes.
minute. I have to think about this for myself? Sure
Yep.
do. Wait, then I guess I better figure it out. Guess you
Yep.
better. And it's
Yeah.
amazing what those little freakers figure out for
So
good.
true. So true. I was just thinking as you're talking too, like the talk, the peacemaker talk that President Nelson gave.
Mhm.
And, I think a lot of times people misconstrue a lot of, conference talks about things like that are just like, well, I've got to be a peacemaker and I've got to do these things. But nowhere have I ever heard, and a lot of times people will, or the speaker will say, this doesn't mean that you allow people to treat you terribly. Right?
Yep.
That you, like
Yep.
being a peacemaker, is setting the boundary, is saying, I'm no longer willing to stay in this relationship the way it is because it's not healthy for me, it's not healthy for you. I'm setting the boundary. That is the peacemaking of the situation.
Yep. And that's where I really encourage people to look at the doctrinal actual attributes of Christ in his life versus what we anecdotally see him as, kind of
Yes.
Jesus meek and mild. Like
Yeah.
this guy's flipping tables in temples in which he wove a whip, which then you have to ask yourself the question, like, how did he know how to weave a whip?
Yeah.
So this wasn't like he accidentally had an outburst in childish anger. The
Yeah.
dude weaved a whip and went in with intention.
Yeah.
No, he knew what he was doing, right? When he has the
Hmm.
experience with the Pharisees, when they drop someone in from the roof, he's like, your sins are forgiven there. They're over there talking. They're not even talking to him. He looks over
Yeah.
and he's like, hey, you over there. Is it better that I'd say I'm the son of God, or I'll heal this dude right now in front of you so you know that I am? Be
Yeah.
healed. Boom. Mic drop. Apostles,
Yeah.
let's roll. Right? Like, and
Yeah.
so peacemaking isn't, I'm not talking about violence, but you
Right.
look at things like Gandhi, Martin Luther King, direct action. These were peaceful people doing peaceful, real change,
Yeah.
right, in gospel movement. And so peace is not having your partner looking at a bunch of a porn and you acting like a mouse.
Yeah.
That's not peacemaking. Jesus is
Right.
not, show me that New Testament story. I'd love for, email me
Yeah.
at
Yeah. Yeah.
stephenwshields.com. Send me that email of that story with
Yeah.
Christ. I'd love to talk doctrine with you. Go
Yeah.
ahead and tell me that. And that's the part where here you can ask that same prayer. Go ahead and go pray. Dear Heavenly Father, do you want me to stay in this marriage where nothing changes? Are you with me that
Yeah.
because I made a covenant, I should stay here no matter what?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or ask the prayer, God, do you want me to seek you first, whether that costs me my marriage or not?
Yeah.
Is my job to truly follow you, or should I put staying in a relationship with my husband before following you?
Right.
That's
Yeah.
a prayer he'll answer every time.
Right. Exactly.
Now, depending on where you're at in your journey, that can have a lot of scary things in front of you. So I encourage you with
Yeah.
those three people you shared your story with
Yeah.
and the
Get them in
safety you're
line first.
creating to get the help. Well, that's why we talked about them in the order we did.
Yes.
So
No, that's
create
a
the safety. So you need to do it from a place of
yeah.
safety and resourcing, whether that's professionally coaching with Nikki or otherwise,
Yeah.
right? It's like, yeah, you need to get the resourcing that you
Yeah.
need, right?
Yeah.
in order to don't go on a road trip with the car with a flat tire, crack in the windshield, empty, needing an oil change, and you didn't even pick up the swig drink. Like this is like no. Like change the tires, get the
Yeah.
oil, clean out the car, have the good snacks, have fresh
Yeah.
drinks,
Yeah.
a good set of CDs if you're old
Yeah.
enough to me to remember those days. Like get right, like have it all there. Like
Yeah.
definitely resourcing yourself. But
Yeah.
the overarching truth, Nikki, is that if you will do your own healing, it's the most influential thing you can have on the people around you.
Yeah.
Period. Bar none.
So true. So true. Yes. The age old put your own oxygen mask on
Mm-hmm.
situation, right? And then you can help
100%.
so many more people. And you're not
Yep.
there laying in the aisle, another person to have to help, right? Yeah.
Yep. And there's a cool old school movie. If you remember, it's an old Christian film called Fireproof,
Hmm.
about a dude who's
I think
looking
I've
at
seen that.
porn. And it's old. It's
Yes.
old. And
Yeah.
he's a firefighter. And so
Yeah.
he throws and she's super bitter throughout the whole
Yeah.
movie. So like he takes the computer and throws it out in the trash,
Yeah.
because that's where he's looking at the porn, and he puts flowers there. She comes home and she looks at it. She takes the flowers and throws them in the trash.
Yeah.
So because she's just hurt, right?
Yeah.
And there's this beautiful scene at the end of the movie because he's really like, because he didn't make the marriage contingent anymore. He said, I'm
Yeah.
going to choose God and recovery, and whatever she does, she does. And there's a beautiful scene of that where they're standing in the fire station where she essentially says to him, like, I want what you have.
Yeah.
Like I can tell you've really done it. Like,
Yeah.
help me see it. And this beautiful tear-jerking moment where they come back together, and anyone can have that effect on their spouse. If you're
Yeah.
willing to push through that tension and move forward,
Yeah.
the vast majority of couples I work with and see, that partner will come,
Hmm.
but you got to just go.
Yeah. I love that. This is awesome. Thank you so much. I just love how those built on each other. I love how they're actionable, doable, things that really, I think when people think of support, I think a lot of times people think, how do I fix them? Tell me the thing to fix them. And what I love about this is about all about pouring back into yourself so that you can show up and be that environment that is the safe environment for somebody to exist in addiction and be able to move forward with that.
However, disclaimer though, with going down this path, Nikki, there's a couple problems with it. One, you won't be in therapy for the rest of your life. Two, you'll have to actually experience joy and be
Yeah.
happy and move in that. And you
Yeah.
have to have relationships that actually just work.
Yeah.
So, disclaimer, if you don't want to
Yep.
be doing any of those
Yep.
things, if you'd like your therapist as a best friend for the rest of your life and you want misery as company so you have somebody to complain about, do not follow these steps.
Yeah, good caveats. I love it. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on the podcast. I would love to
This is
send people
awesome.
your way as well. Tell them how to find you, how to find the podcast, how can they find your practice?
Yeah, so you can find depending on when this episode starts, we are doing
Yeah.
an accepted podcast. So Nikki, you'll have to come on when we
Yeah,
do the
I'd
accepted
love
pod. Come
to.
hang out with us. So
Yeah.
you'll hear Nikki there. But Unashamed Unafraid is the podcast. So you can go to
Okay.
Unashamed, on social media and whatever. It's easy to find. But wherever you listen to podcasts, Unashamed
Okay.
Unafraid is there.
Okay.
If you want to contact me directly, my email is me,
Okay.
at stephenwshields.com. But if you go to acceptedlife.com or Google accepted therapy, you'll find us. That's where you can find me, all my partners, the different programs we have going on,
Awesome.
and different workshops of doing stuff like that.
Perfect. I will link all those things in the show notes because I think they're awesome resources and we definitely want people to know about those things. Do you have Instagram that you do? I know it's on there, but do you
I
yeah.
personally don't. I'm the worst.
Yeah.
We do, if you do, at accepted.life is our and so you can find us there. It's one of
Okay.
my claim to fames as a millennial that I've never had an Instagram or a Facebook or a MySpace. So I know I should get one, but
Yeah, that's great. I'll send him all those. It will be in the show notes. And thank you so much for taking the time to come on the podcast and share those. I think all of them are wonderful tips and can be applying one of them can be life changing.
I agree. No, happy to be here and love what you're doing. So
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for listening to the LDS Mental Health Podcast. I hope you were able to find ways of healing, guidance, and peace. If you liked this episode, please share it with a friend who would love to start thinking in a higher and holier way as well. Or hit that follow button so you don't miss out on any episodes. Also, check out the links in my show notes for other episodes you might like and links for other mental health resources on my website.